Picture this. You're standing in a virtual reality headset, about to buy a plot of digital land in the Metaverse for 50,000 real dollars. The land doesn't exist. You can't farm it. You can't build a house your family can actually live in. You can't even touch it. But you're still reaching for your credit card because somehow, in the year 2025, we've convinced ourselves that owning coordinates on a server is the next logical step in human evolution. If that sounds even remotely normal to you, you should probably hit subscribe now. Because once you see how this land game really works, you'll never look at ownership the same way again. How did we get here? How did we go from fighting over actual dirt to paying real money for pixels? And why does this feel like the most natural progression in the world? Welcome to the fever dream that is human civilization. We've been having the same argument for 10,000 years, and we're still not done. The only thing that's changed is how abstract we've made the whole thing. The politicians and tech bros will tell you this is innovation. They'll say we're democratizing ownership, creating new economies, building the future. The Metaverse companies will promise you that virtual real estate is just like the real thing, except better because it's not limited by physics. The blockchain evangelists will swear that digital scarcity is the same as actual scarcity, just more efficient. Normal people, they're buying it. Literally. They're taking out second mortgages on their actual homes to buy virtual homes. They're treating NFT land deeds like they're the Doomsday Book. They're calm because they think they understand the game. They think this time is different. But here's the thing about fever dreams. They follow patterns. And this pattern is older than Bitcoin, older than the internet, older than banks themselves. To understand why you're about to spend your retirement fund on a JPEG of a house, we need to trace this madness back to its source. Let me walk you through the 7 stages of how humanity took the most solid thing on Earth and turned it into almost nothing. Stage 1. The Age of Territory. Picture early humans, maybe 40,000 years ago. There's no ownership because there's no concept of ownership. A lion doesn't own the riverbank, he just defends it until something bigger comes along. Wolves don't hold title to the valley, they hold it through strength and fear. This is proof of work in its most honest form. For 99% of human history, we worked the same way. Land wasn't something you owned. It was something you belonged to. It was the graves of your ancestors, the spirits of the forest, the gods in the mountains. The idea of selling the earth would be like selling the sky. Pure madness. But madness, as we've learned, has a way of finding a foothold. Stage 2. The birth of the ledger. Around 10,000 years ago, some genius figured out agriculture. Sounds peaceful, right? Wrong. Agriculture was one of the most violent ideas in human history because the moment you plant a seed, everything changes. You're no longer just passing through. You're invested. You have to wait. You have to guard your little patch of dirt from everyone else who wants to eat this year. The first fence was a stick. The second fence was a word. The moment someone wrote down who owned what, land stopped being just dirt. It became an asset, a line item on a clay tablet. The first writing wasn't poetry or philosophy. It was accounting. 3 bushels of barley to the temple. This field belongs to whoever can read this tablet. The Romans perfected this system. They weren't just farmers, they were managers. They built massive slave-worked estates called latifundia, dedicated not to feeding families, but to generating profit. They carved up the conquered world with roads and aqueducts, marking their ownership not with paint, but with 20-foot-thick concrete. They built a legal code that made land truly horrifyingly liquid. It could be bought, sold, inherited, and most importantly, taken. Stage 3. The pyramid scheme of dirt. Fast forward to 1066. William the Conqueror takes England but immediately realizes he has a problem. He owns everything, but he doesn't know what everything is worth. How do you tax what you can't count? How do you reward your buddies when you don't know what you're giving them? So in 1086, he orders the greatest audit in history, the Domesday Book. His men go village by village counting every pig, every plow, every person. Who owned this before we showed up? Who owns it now? This book becomes the final word. Its judgment is as certain as the day of judgment itself. This is feudalism. Land isn't just property anymore, it's pure power. The king theoretically owns everything. He's the central bank. He loans it out to his dukes and barons in exchange for loyalty, soldiers, and blood. It's a pyramid scheme built on dirt, and at the bottom sits the farmer who doesn't own the land. The land owns him. He's part of the asset, a non-fungible token bound to the soil. This brutal system holds the world in its grip for centuries, until we figure out how to scale the scam globally. Stage 4. The Age of the Map. Here's where it gets really ugly. What happens when your pyramid scheme runs out of dirt? You find more dirt. Or, more accurately, you invent more dirt. You sail west and find continents that are inconveniently already occupied by people who still think land is sacred. To the Aztecs, the Incas, the Iroquois, the land is still a god, a mother, a place of ancestors. They're living in chapter 1 of this story. The men who arrive in ships are already in chapter 3. How do you conquer a god? You don't conquer it, you redraw it. The map becomes the most devastating weapon ever invented. It's technology that lets you claim ownership over something you've never seen from 1,000 miles away. A man in a silk robe in Madrid draws a line on paper, and suddenly he's claimed 1,000,000 square miles of rainforest. He's just committed genocide with a pen. The Treaty of Tordesillas in 1494. Spain and Portugal split the entire globe like they're dividing a pizza. They draw a line down the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. We'll take this side, you take that side. The sheer breathtaking arrogance. They're dividing an orange they haven't even peeled. The people living there? They aren't on the map, and if you're not on the map, you don't exist. You're part of the flora, a resource to be cleared. In America, we see the birth of the land speculator. The Virginia Company, the Massachusetts Bay Company. These aren't explorers, they're startups. Venture capitalists, funded by the Crown, seeking return on investment. They're flipping continents, selling paradise by the acre. The first great land rush. The original asset becomes a commodity, packaged, marketed, and sold on something that looks suspiciously like a futures market. It doesn't matter if the land is a swamp, a desert, or a mountain. All that matters is who holds the paper. Stage 5. The industrial inversion. For thousands of years, the equation was simple. Land makes food, food makes people, people make power. Then the Industrial Revolution broke everything. It starts with the discovery not on the land, but under it. Coal. Black, greasy rocks. The compressed ghosts of ancient forests. Stored sunlight from 1,000,000-year-old summer. Suddenly a barren patch of rock in Wales is worth more than all the fertile fields of Normandy. The value of land completely inverts. We aren't just farming it anymore, we're consuming it. The earth becomes a battery and we plug ourselves in. This creates the factory, which needs to be fed with human hands. Enter the enclosures. In England, the aristocracy decides sheep are more profitable than people. They take the commons, the land that belonged to everyone, and they privatize it. They fence off the horizon. Where do all those displaced people go? They drift toward the smoke, toward the cities. London, Manchester, New York. Here, land isn't measured in acres, but in square feet, in square inches. Its value isn't about what it grows, but how high you can build on it. How many humans you can stack on top of each other in dark, damp tenements. The feudal lord owned the farmer. The industrialist just owns the ground beneath the farmer's feet. He calls it rent. It's a cleaner, more efficient, and entirely legal form of ownership. Stage 6. Enter the casino. We finally do it. We take the most solid thing on earth and turn it into a ghost. Welcome to Wall Street in the 2000s. The brightest minds of a generation, people with physics PhDs and supercomputers, look at a suburban house in Ohio and think, how can we slice this thing up? They take thousands of 30-year mortgages, suburban dreams, and bundle them together. They call it a mortgage-backed security and sell it as one solid, safe investment. It's like taking 1,000 different streams and calling the resulting river safe to drink. But that isn't enough. They take the riskier mortgages, the subprime loans, the ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets, and bundle those together too. They call this toxic sludge a collateralized debt obligation. Then they convince the rating agencies to stamp it as the safest investment on earth. They're selling digital ghosts and calling them gold. The land itself, the house, the family living inside, they're irrelevant. They're just underlying assets. A line buried so deep in the prospectus that nobody can find it. We're trading shadows. We're betting on echoes. The entire global economy is perched on a spreadsheet that assumes the price of land can never, ever go down. You'd think we'd learn. We don't. The crash comes. The day the ghost evaporates. The day we realize that costo A-rated assets are worth zero. It's the oldest story in the world. Romans shaving silver from their coins. Kings printing paper money. We've just found a new way to dilute the asset. We don't just break the banks. We break the idea of real. We prove that the most valuable asset in the world was just a story we told ourselves. And we stop believing it. Stage 7. The age of the echo. So where does this fever end? It doesn't end. It just migrates to new hosts. After 2008, we lose faith in the ledger. We lose faith in banks, governments, the men in suits who promised the ghosts were real. And right on cue, a new ledger appears, born from the ashes of the crash. Bitcoin. A digital ledger that promises to be outside the system. Trustless, decentralized, finite. Digital land for people who no longer trust actual land. We had so completely broken the physical world that we had to invent a new one. And now we're taking the next step. The perfect, absurd conclusion to this 10,000-year story. We're buying virtual real estate, paying real money for pixels, for coordinates on a server, for plots of Earth in digital worlds that some 20-year-old CEO in California could delete with a single keystroke. We've gone from defending territory with spears to buying literally nothing with credit cards. What does this look like for regular people? Let's get specific about the damage. You're 25 years old and you can't afford a house because every piece of actual land has been bought up by hedge funds treating housing like a commodity. But you can afford to buy virtual land in a Metaverse platform for the price of a used car. So you do because at least it's something you can call yours. You're a small business owner who gets priced out of your neighborhood because a tech company buys the whole block to build offices that will sit empty half the time. Meanwhile, that same tech company is selling the virtual office space online at premium prices. You're retired, and your pension fund is invested in complex financial instruments that nobody understands. Backed by real estate that may or may not exist in markets that may or may not crash. while some kid on social media is making millions flipping NFT land. This is what happens when the fever reaches terminal stage. The people who actually need places to live get priced out of reality and offered virtual substitutes. The people who have money get to speculate on both the real and the fake, doubling their bets on human desperation. So what's coming next? Because this story isn't over. Future one is reform. Governments wake up and start treating digital assets like what they mostly are right now: speculative gambling. They regulate the metaverse companies, tax virtual real estate like real estate, and force some connection between digital scarcity and actual scarcity. This is the optimistic timeline where sanity shows up. Future 2 is stagnation. We muddle through with two parallel economies, the physical world for the poor, the digital world for the rich. Virtual real estate becomes just another asset class for people with too much money, while everyone else gets locked out of both markets. This is the boring dystopia timeline. Future 3 is the reset. The whole digital house of cards collapses when people remember that you can't actually live in the metaverse. Server farms fail, companies go bankrupt. Virtual worlds disappear overnight, taking billions in virtual real estate with them. We're back to fighting over actual dirt. This is the chaos timeline. Future 4 is museum mode. The physical world becomes a museum that only rich people can afford to visit, while everyone else lives in increasingly sophisticated virtual worlds. Physical land becomes so expensive that it's basically fictional, while virtual land becomes so realistic that it's basically physical. This is the full inversion timeline. Which future are we heading for? Follow the money and you'll get your answer. Here's your mental toolkit for navigating this madness. First, remember that every revolution in how we think about land has been driven by technology. Writing created the ledger. Ships created global colonialism. Coal created industrial cities. Computers created financial derivatives. Virtual reality and blockchains are creating digital real estate. The technology changes. The underlying fever stays exactly the same. Second, understand that scarcity can be natural or artificial, but the market often treats them exactly the same. There's a limited amount of actual land on Earth. There's also a limited amount of land in a video game universe. The difference is that one limit is set by physics, the other is set by a terms of service update. Third, watch what happens when the virtual and the physical collide. When virtual real estate begins influencing actual rent prices because landlords think they can make more money in digital worlds. When banks start accepting virtual assets as collateral for real loans. When governments start taxing virtual property to pay for physical infrastructure, the war for land isn't over. It's just migrated from the physical world to the world of ideas. We're still drawing lines in the mud and arguing over who gets to stand where. The only difference is that now the mud is made of pixels and the lines are made of code. You want to know the really insane part? This might actually be progress. Every stage of this evolution has made land more liquid, more divisible, more accessible to more people. The feudal serf was bound to his plot of dirt for life. The modern homeowner can sell and move across the planet. The virtual landowner can buy and sell plots of digital earth from their phone while sitting on the toilet. We've taken the most illiquid asset in human history and made it infinitely liquid. We've turned dirt into data, and data moves at the speed of light. The question isn't whether this is good or bad. The question is whether you understand what's happening well enough to not get completely fleeced by it. Because at the end of the day, whether we're talking about actual acres or digital plots, medieval manors or metaverse mansions, the game is always the same. Someone draws a line and says, "This is mine." Someone else tries to move that line. And someone always ends up holding the bag when the music stops. The music hasn't stopped. It's just changed key. And the dance floor is now inside a headset. Remember, every empire thinks it's different. Every bubble thinks it's permanent. Every revolution thinks it's the last one. We're not special. We're just the latest chapter in the same 10,000-year-old story. The only difference is that this time the story is being written in code. If you enjoyed having 10 millennia of human land fever compressed into one video, subscribe and go watch our breakdown on how central banks turned money into a magic trick. Because if you think land is abstract, wait until you see what we did to currency. History doesn't repeat, but it absolutely charges interest. And sooner or later, the bill shows up.